2, 1. Hare Krishna. Welcome back, everyone, to the live studios. And this time, we're here in the temple room of Radha Govinda's temple with Radha Govinda's devotees in the Mile High City, sometimes called Denver, but more appropriately called Badrik Ashram. Badrik Ashram is also in the mountains. And we're here to read the Srimad-Bhagavatam because, as I just told my new audience, well, they're not new, I've seen most of them before, but new in the sense that I haven't done this before with you, in front of you. We're reading the Srimad-Bhagavatam. We've reached the 6th chapter of the 1st canto. So if you would like to turn to the 6th chapter, the 1st canto, we welcome all of you out there in cyberspace for the benefit of a new audience. We have just reached over 600 followers of this nightly reading of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and we've had up to 1,400 views and as low as, 100. So it's various. Hare Krishna. So the first thing we do is we recite the beautiful glorification of Sanatana Goswami, who happened to be the senior disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spent more time directly instructing Sanatana Goswami than anyone else on the planet. And he was senior, even to Rupa Goswami. Although we are called Rupanugas, Rupa Goswami considered Sanatana Goswami his guru, and his elder brother also. All right, welcome everybody out in cyberspace, wherever you are. Hare Krishna. It goes like this: Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram Sarva Shastabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of light to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalidvandudita Ditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Partaya, Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshak Shodayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who were supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaka Madbhagya Madananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Saduta Dayin Atini chochatakara Hanamun Chagadachin Mam Premnarit Kandayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. For the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada, for the pleasure of Shishi Gaur Nitai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra, Giriraj Govardhan, Shishi Radha Govinda, we're going to recite the Srimad-Bhagavatam from Srila Prabhupada's translation and purports, which, by the way, are very dear to him. Srimad-Bhagavatam, first canto, 6th chapter, conversation between Narada and Vyasadeva. Text 1. Sutta said, O Brahmanas, thus hearing about Sri Narada's birth and activities, Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God and son of Satyavati, inquired as follows. Purport. Vyasadeva was further inquisitive to know about the perfection of Naradaji, and therefore he wanted to know about him more and more. In this chapter, Naradaji will describe how he was able to have a brief audience with the Lord while he was absorbed in the transcendental thought of separation from the Lord when it was very painful for him. Text 2. Sri Vyasadeva said, what did you, Narada, do after the departure of the great saints? What did you, Narada, do after the departure of the great sages who had instructed you in the scientific transcendental knowledge before the beginning of your present birth? Purport. Vyasadeva himself was the disciple of Naradaji, and therefore it was natural to be anxious to hear what Narada did after initiation from the spiritual master. You wanted to follow in Narada's footsteps in order to attain to the same perfect stage of life. This desire to inquire from the spiritual master is an essential factor to the progressive path. This process is technically known as Sad-Dharma Prichcha. Text 3. O son of Brahma, how did you pass your life after initiation? And how did you attain this body, having quit your old one in due course? Purport. Sri Narada Muni in his previous life was just an ordinary maidservant's son. So how he became so perfectly transformed into the spiritual body of eternal life, bliss, and knowledge is certainly important. Sri Vyasadeva desired him to disclose the facts for everyone's satisfaction. Text 4. O great sage, time annihilates everything in due course. So how is it that this subject matter, which happened prior to this day of Brahma, is still fresh in your memory, undisturbed by time? Purport. As spirit is not annihilated, even after the annihilation of the material body, so also spiritual consciousness is not annihilated. Sri Narada developed this spiritual consciousness even when he had his material body in the previous kalpa. Consciousness of the material body means spiritual consciousness expressed through the medium of a material body. This consciousness is inferior, destructible, and perverted. But superconsciousness of the supramind in the spiritual plane is as good as the spirit soul and is never annihilated. Text 5. Sri Narada said, "The great sages who had imparted scientific knowledge of transcendence to me departed for other places, and I had to pass my life in this way." Purport. In his previous life, when Naradaji was impregnated with spiritual knowledge by the grace of the great sages, there was a tangible change in his life, although he was only a boy of 5 years. That is an important symptom visible after initiation by the bona fide spiritual master. Actual association of devotees brings about a quick change in life for spiritual realization. How it is so acted upon the previous life, how it so acted upon the previous life of Sri Narada Muni is described by and by in this chapter. This is a very important lesson, because spiritual life is not about following a rule or regulation, passing an exam and writing an essay and getting a certificate at the end. That's not what spiritual life is about. Spiritual life is about the change of heart that happens when we actually submissively hear the holy name of the Lord and the holy pastimes of the Lord. The soul has this knowledge already. It's already there. Therefore, sometimes if a person is especially qualified, just by hearing for a very short period of time, they'll just say, "Hey, that's right, that's it. Okay, I'm in." We have an example. Don't want to embarrass you. Just recently, Bhakta Matt read the Perfection of Yoga. He was already kind of like a little fed up with material life anyway. But he read this and he said, "Hey, this is the real deal." And then there was another devotee who came in Houston that when we were doing this every night, like this. His name is John. He's a 52-year-old master electrician. And he looks like a 52-year-old Houstonian master electrician. You know, big and burly with a southern drawl, and his glasses that are kind of like rose-colored, and far-out guy, really far-out guy. And he started coming, isn't it? And he just said, "Hey, this is the real deal." And he never left. He's here every single day. He comes up to me about 4 days ago. He says, "Maharaj, what can I do to become your disciple? I'm into this. I'm serious." Just after a few days. This is not a story. These books are not stories. These books are historical documents. They explain things that actually happened in history. How many people in the room here today, devotees, have a great-great-great-grandfather? Okay, everybody does. Raise your hand, you can't cop out. You couldn't be here unless you had a great-great-great-grandfather, because that's the way it happens. So, how many people have seen their great-great-great-grandfather in the flesh? Just as I thought. And yet everybody raised their hand that I have one. And you've never seen him. How do you know? You know. Well, I saw a picture once. What happens if it was before that when they started to take pictures? Well, my dad told me, right. This is the way knowledge comes to us. It's the way knowledge comes to everyone. Every single human being in the universe. This isn't something so mystical, so it is special, it is mystical because of the topic and because of the personality, the level of the personalities that are speaking. But it's true. Every single word, every single event is true. And if you hear it like that, with full faith, with love and devotion, and, very important, without argument. This is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the Antya-lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita speaking. Then what happens is you get Krishna immediately. And your heart changes. Your heart actually changes. Now that doesn't mean that that's going to happen to everybody, and it doesn't mean that if it doesn't happen to you immediately that you should, pack up your bags and go somewhere else, because this doesn't work. But it's telling you what can happen. It's telling you what has happened. It's telling you what will happen if you stay. Under all conditions. Reliability over time breeds what? Somebody. Faith. Trust. Faith. Faith, trust, same thing. So there's a lot of talk about how we have to have faith in Krishna. Well, he's been pretty reliable. These books have been passed down for, 311 trillion years? That's pretty reliable. A lot of time to be reliable. Now he wants us to be reliable over time so that he can have faith in us. And that's the name of the game. He's already proven himself. He doesn't have anything to prove. If you accept this scripture, this historical document as factual. Narada said, Sri Narada said, the great sages who had imparted scientific knowledge of transcendence to me departed for other places, and I had to pass my life in this way. Purport. In his previous life, when Naradaji was impregnated with spiritual knowledge by the grace of the great sages, there was a tangible change in his life, although he was only a boy, 5 years. That is an important symptom visible after initiation by the bona fide spiritual master. Actual association of devotees brings about a quick change in life for spiritual realization. How it is so acted upon the previous life of Sri Narada Muni is described by and by in this chapter, text 6. I was the only son of my mother, who was not only a simple woman, but a maidservant as well. Since I was her only offspring, she had no other alternative for protection. She bound me with the tie of affection. Text 7. She wanted to look after my maintenance properly, but because she was not independent, she was not able to do anything for me. The world is under the full control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, everyone is like a wooden doll in the hands of a puppet master. Text 8. When I was a mere child of 5 years, I lived in a Brahmana school. I was dependent on my mother's affection and had no experience of different lands. Text 9. Once upon a time, my poor mother, when going out one night to milk a cow, was bitten on the leg by a serpent influenced by supreme time. Purport. That is the way of dragging a sincere soul nearer to God. The poor boy was being looked after only by his affectionate mother, and yet the mother was taken away from the world by the supreme will in order to put him completely at the mercy of the Lord. Text 10. A little different way of looking at the world. I took this as a special mercy of the Lord, who always desires benediction for his devotees. And so thinking, I started for the north. Purport. Confidential devotees of the Lord see in every step a benedictory direction of the Lord. What is considered to be an odd or difficult moment in the mundane sense is accepted as special mercy of the Lord. Mundane prosperity is a kind of material fever, and by the grace of the Lord, the temperature of this material fever is gradually diminishing, and spiritual health is obtained step by step. Mundane people misunderstand it. There's a really far story I read about recently. There was what is called a televangelist. They get on the TV, and it's very easy to become one. You just apply to be a religion, and you have to fill out a form, and then you can be a televangelist. So he told his followers, just send me your money and write a prayer on it, and I will offer it to the Lord, and it will surely come true. And then gave an address. Well, later on they found out that the address was the address of the bank. And he had instructed them to just put the money in his account and throw away the prayers. And people were throwing money at him because he was promising what? Mundane prosperity. This is what it's come to now. Success in religion means prosperity. If you're not prosperous, then you're a nobody, materially or spiritually. And we have a whole culture convinced of that, then you got problems, big problems. And therefore, we have big problems. Text 11. Going? See you. See you later. Hare Krishna. Text 11. After my departure, I passed through many flourishing metropolises, towns, villages, animal farms, mines, agricultural lands, valleys, flower gardens, nursery gardens, and natural forests. Purport. Men's activities in agriculture, mining, farming, industries, gardening, and so on were all on the same scale as they are now, even previous to the present creation. And the same activities will remain as they are, even in the next creation. After many hundreds of millions of years, one creation is started by the law of nature, and the history of the universe repeats itself practically in the same way. The mundane wranglers waste time with archaeological excavations without searching into the vital necessities of life. After getting an impetus in spiritual life, Sri Narada Muni, even though a mere child, did not waste time for a single moment with economic development. Although he passed towns and villages, mines and industries, he continually went on to progressive spiritual emancipation. Srimad-Bhagavatam is the repetition of history, which happened some hundreds of millions of years ago. As it was said herein before, only the most important factors of history are picked up to be recorded in this transcendental literature. Text 12. I passed through hills and mountains full of reservoirs of various minerals like gold, silver, and copper, and through tracts of land with reservoirs of water filled with beautiful lotus flowers, fit for the denizens of heaven, decorated with bewildered bees and singing birds. Text 13. I then passed alone through many forests of rushes, bamboo, reeds, sharp grass, weeds, and caves, which were very difficult to go through alone. I visited deep, dark, and dangerously fearful forests, which were the play yards of snakes, owls, and jackals. Purport. It is the duty of a mendicant, Parivrajaka to experience all varieties of God's creation by traveling alone through all forests, hills, towns, villages, and so on, to gain faith in God and strength of mind, as well as to enlighten the inhabitants with the message of God. A sannyasi is duty-bound to take all these risks without fear, and the most typical sannyasi of the present age is Lord Chaitanya, who traveled in the same manner through the central Indian jungles, enlightening even the tigers, bears, snakes, deer, elephants, and many other jungle animals. In this age of Kali, sannyasi is forbidden for ordinary men. One who changes his dress to make propaganda is a different man from the original ideal sannyasi. One should, however, take the vow to stop social intercourse completely and devote life exclusively to the service of the Lord. The change of dress is only a formality. Lord Chaitanya did not accept the name of a sannyasi, and in this age of Kali, the so-called sannyasis should not change their former names, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. In this age, devotional service of hearing and chant and repeating the holy glories of the Lord is strongly recommended, and repeating the holy glories of the Lord, and one who takes the vow of renunciation of family life need not imitate the Parivrajaka like Narada or Lord Chaitanya, but may sit down in some holy place and devote his whole time and energy to hear and repeatedly chant the holy scriptures left by the great acharyas like the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. And you can do that, by the way, in your house. Anywhere. Text 14. Thus traveling, I felt tired, both bodily and mentally, and I was both thirsty and hungry. So I took a bath in a river lake and also drank water. By contacting water, I got relief from my exhaustion. Purport. A traveling mendicant can meet the needs of the body, namely thirst and hunger, by the gifts of nature without being a beggar at the doors of the householders. The mendicant therefore does not go to the house of a householder to beg, but to enlighten him spiritually. Text 15. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the Supersoul situated within, using my intelligence as I had learned from the liberated souls. Purport. One should not meditate according to one's personal whims. One should know perfectly well from the authoritative sources of scriptures, through the transparent medium of a bona fide spiritual master, and by proper use of one's trained intelligence for meditating upon the Supersoul dwelling within every living being. This consciousness is firmly fixed by a devotee who has rendered loving service unto the Lord by carrying out the orders of the spiritual master. Sri Naradaji contacted bona fide spiritual masters, served them sincerely, and got enlightenment rightly. Thus he began to meditate. Text 16. As soon as I began to meditate upon the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, with my mind transformed in transcendental love, tears rolled down from my eyes, and without delay, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared on the lotus of my heart. Purport. The word bhava is significant here. This bhava stage is attained after one has transcendental affection for the Lord. The first initial stage is called shraddha, or a liking of the Supreme Lord. And in order to increase that liking, one has to associate with pure devotees of the Lord. The third stage is to practice the prescribed rules and regulations of devotional service. This will dissipate all sorts of misgivings and remove all personal deficiencies that hamper progress in devotional service. When all misgivings and personal deficiencies are removed, there is a standard faith in transcendental matter, and the taste for it increases in greater proportion. This stage leads to attraction, and after this, there is bhava, or the prior stage of unalloyed love for God. All the above different stages are but different stages of development of transcendental love. Being so surcharged with transcendental love, there comes a strong feeling of separation which leads to 8 different kinds of ecstasies. Tears from the eyes of a devotee are an automatic reaction, and because Sri Narada Muni in his previous birth attained that stage very quickly after his departure from home, it was quite possible for him to perceive the actual presence of the Lord, which he tangibly experienced by his developed spiritual senses without material tinge. Text 17. O Vyasadeva, at that time, being exceedingly overpowered by feelings of happiness, every part of my body became separately enlivened. Being absorbed in an ocean of ecstasy, I could not see both myself and the Lord. Purport. Spiritual feelings of happiness and intense ecstasies have no mundane comparison. Therefore, it is very difficult to give expression to such feelings. We can just have a glimpse of such ecstasy in the words of Sri Narada Muni. Each and every part of such ecstasy, in the words of Sri Narada Muni, we can just have a glimpse of such ecstasy in the words of Sri Narada Muni. Each and every part of the body or senses has a particular function. After seeing the Lord, all the senses become fully awakened to render service unto the Lord, because in the liberated state, the senses are fully efficient in serving the Lord. As such, in that transcendental ecstasy, it so happened that the senses became separately enlivened to serve the Lord. This being so, Narada Muni lost himself in seeing both himself and the Lord simultaneously. Text 18. The transcendental form of the Lord as it is satisfies the mind's desire, and at once erases all mental incongruities. Upon losing that form, I suddenly got up, being perturbed, as is usual when one loses that which is desirable. Purport. That the Lord is not formless is experienced by Narada Muni, but his form is completely different from all forms of our material experience. For the whole duration of our life, we go on seeing different forms in the material world, but none of them is just apt to satisfy the mind, nor can any one of them vanish all perturbance of the mind. These are the special features of the transcendental form of the Lord. And one who has once seen that form is not satisfied with anything else. No form in the material world can no form in the material world can any longer satisfy the seer. That the Lord is formless or impersonal means that he has nothing like a material form and is not like any material personality. As spiritual beings, having eternal relations with that transcendental form of the Lord, we are, life after life, searching after that form of the Lord, and we are not satisfied by any other form of material appeasement. Narada Muni got a glimpse of this, but having not seen it again, he became perturbed and stood up all of a sudden to search it out. What we desire, life after life, was obtained by Narada Muni after, and losing sight of him again was certainly a great shock for him. 19. I desired to see again that transcendental form of the Lord, but despite my attempts to concentrate upon the heart with eagerness to view the form again, I could not see him any more, and thus dissatisfied, I was very much aggrieved. Purport. There is no mechanical process to see the form of the Lord. It completely depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. We cannot demand the Lord to be present before our vision, just as we cannot demand the sun to rise whenever we like. The sun rises out of his own accord. So also the Lord is pleased to be present out of his causeless mercy. One should simply await the opportune moment and go on discharging his prescribed duty in devotional service of the Lord. Narada Muni thought that the Lord could be seen again by the same mechanical process which was successful in the first attempt. But in spite of his utmost endeavor, he could not make the second attempt successful. The Lord is completely independent of all obligations. He can simply be bound up by the tie of unalloyed devotion. Nor is he visible or perceivable by our material senses. When he pleases, being satisfied with the sincere attempt of devotional service, depending completely on the mercy of the Lord, then he may be seen out of his own accord. Text 20. I didn't ask for it. Go ahead. Don't need it. Anyway, Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you all. Text 20. Seeing my attempts in that lonely place, the personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all mundane description, spoke to me with gravity and pleasing words, just to mitigate my grief. Purport. In the Vedas it is said that God is beyond the approach of mundane words and intelligence, and yet by his causeless mercy one can have suitable senses to hear him or to speak of him or to speak to him. This is the Lord's inconceivable energy. One upon whom this mercy is bestowed can hear him. The Lord was much pleased with Narada Muni, and therefore the necessary strength was invested in him so that he could hear the Lord. It is not, however, possible for others to perceive directly the touch of the Lord during the probationary stage of regulative devotional service. It was a special gift for Narada. When he heard the pleasing words of the Lord, the feelings of separation were to some extent mitigated. A devotee in love with God feels always the pangs of separation and is therefore always enwrapped in transcendental ecstasy. Text 21. O Narada, the Lord spoke, I regret that during this lifetime you will not be able to see me anymore. Those who are incomplete in service and who are not completely free from all material taints can hardly see me. Purport. The personality of Godhead is described in the Bhagavad Gita as the most pure, the supreme, and the absolute truth. There is no trace of a tinge of materiality in his person, and thus one who has the slightest tinge of material affection cannot approach him. The beginning of devotional service starts from the point when one is freed from at least two forms of material modes, namely the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. The result is exhibited by the signs of being freed from kama, lust, and lobha, covetousness. That is to say, one must be freed from the desires for sense gratification and avarice for sense gratification. The balanced mode of nature is goodness, and to be completely freed from all material tinges is to become free from the mode of goodness also. To search the audience of God in a lonely forest is considered to be in the mode of goodness. One can go out into the forest to attain spiritual perfection, but that does not mean that one can see the Lord personally there. One must be completely freed from all material attachment and be situated on the plane of transcendence, which alone will help the devotee get in personal touch with the personality of Godhead. The best method is that one should live at a place where the transcendental form of your Lord is worshipped. Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Bhadrak Ashram Dham Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi. Because the form of the Lord is not different than the Lord. The name of the Lord is not different than the Lord. The descriptions of the Lord given by pure devotee of the Lord is not different from the Lord. Hare Krishna. The temple of the Lord is a transcendental place, whereas the forest is a materially good habitation. A neophyte devotee is always recommended to worship the deity of the Lord, Archana, rather than go into the forest to search out the Lord. Devotional service begins from the process of Archana, which is better than going out in the forest. In his present life, which is completely freed from all material hankerings, Sri Narada Muni does not go into the forest, although he can turn every place into Vaikuntha by his presence only. He travels from one planet to another to convert men, gods, kinnaras, gandharvas, rishis, munis, and all others to become devotees of the Lord. By his activities, he has engaged many devotees like Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, and many others in the transcendental service of the Lord. A pure devotee of the Lord, therefore, follows in the footsteps of the great devotees like Narada and Prahlad, and engages his whole time in glorifying the Lord by the process of kirtan. Such a preaching process is transcendental to all material qualities. Text 22. O virtuous one, you have only once seen my person, and this is just to increase your desire for me. Because the more you hanker for me, the more you will be freed from all material desires. Purport. A living being cannot be vacant of desires. He is not a dead stone. He must be working, thinking, feeling, and willing. But when he thinks, feels, and wills materially, he becomes entangled. And conversely, when he thinks, feels, and wills for the service of the Lord, he becomes gradually freed from all entanglement. The more a person is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, the more he acquires a hankering for it. That is the transcendental nature of godly service. Material service has satiation, whereas spiritual service of the Lord has neither satiation nor end. One can go on increasing his hankerings for the loving transcendental service of the Lord, and yet he will not find satiation or end. By intense service of the Lord, one can experience the presence of the Lord transcendentally. Therefore, seeing the Lord means being engaged in his service, because his service and his person are identical. The sincere devotee should go on with sincere service of the Lord. The Lord will give proper direction as to how and where it has to be done. There was no material desire in Narada, and yet just to increase his intense desire for the Lord, he was so advised. Text 23. By service of the Absolute Truth, even for a few days, a devotee attains firm and fixed intelligence in me. Consequently, he goes on to become my associate in the transcendental world after giving up the present deplorable material worlds. Purport. Serving the Absolute Truth means rendering service unto the Absolute Personality of Godhead under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, who is a transparent medium between the Lord and the neophyte devotee. The neophyte devotee has no ability to approach the Absolute Personality of Godhead by the strength of his present imperfect material senses, and therefore, under the direction of the spiritual master, he is trained in transcendental service of the Lord. And by such training, even for some days, the neophyte devotee gets intelligence in such transcendental service, which leads him ultimately to get free from perpetual inhabitation in the material worlds and to be promoted to the transcendental world, to become one of the liberated associates of the Lord in the kingdom of God. Text 24. Intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time, even at the time of creation, as well as at the time of annihilation. Your remembrance will continue by my mercy. Purport. Devotional service rendered to the personality of Godhead never goes in vain. Since the personality of Godhead is eternal, intelligence applied in his service or anything done in his relation is also permanent. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that such transcendental service rendered under the personality of Godhead accumulates birth after birth. And when the devotee is fully matured, the total service counted together makes him eligible to enter into the association of the personality of Godhead. Such accumulation of God's service is never vanquished, but increases until fully matured. Then, that supreme authority, personified by sound and unseen by eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. Feeling a sense of gratitude, I offered my obeisance unto him, bowing my head. Purport. That the personality of Godhead was not seen, but only heard, does not make any difference. The personality of Godhead produced the 4 Vedas by his breathing, and he is seen and realized through the transcendental sound of the Vedas. Similarly, the Bhagavad Gita is the sound representation of the Lord, and there is no difference in identity. The conclusion is that the Lord can be seen and heard by persistent chanting of the transcendental sound. Hare Krishna. Thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are all benedictory. So doing, I travel over the earth, fully satisfied and free from pride and envy. Purport. The life of a sincere devotee of the Lord is thus explained, in a nutshell, by Narada Muni by his personal example. Such a devotee, after his initiation by the Lord or by his bona fide spirit or bona fide representative, takes very seriously chanting of the glories of the Lord and traveling all over the world so that others may also hear the glories of the Lord. Such devotees have no desire for material gain. They are conducted by one single desire, to go back to Godhead. This awaits them in due course on acquitting the material body, because they have the highest aim of life, going back to Godhead. They are never envious of anyone, nor are they proud of being eligible to go back to Godhead. Their only business is to chant and remember the holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord, and according to personal capacity, to distribute the message for others' welfare without motive of material gain. And so, O son, O Brahmana Vyasadeva, in due course of time, I, who was fully absorbed in thinking of Krishna, and who therefore had no attachments, being completely freed from all material taints, met with death as lightning and illumination occur simultaneously. Purport. To be fully absorbed in the thought of Krishna means clearance of material dirts or hankerings. It is as a very rich man has no hankerings for small petty things. So also a devotee of Lord Krishna, who is guaranteed to pass on to the kingdom of God, where life is eternal, fully cognizant, and blissful, naturally has no hankerings for petty material things, which are like dolls or shadows of the reality and are without permanent value. That is the sign of spiritually enriched persons. And in due course of time, when a pure devotee is completely prepared, all of a sudden, the change of body occurs, which is commonly called death. And for the pure devotee, such a change takes place exactly like lightning, and illumination follows simultaneously. That is to say, a devotee simultaneously changes his material body and develops a spiritual body by the will of the Supreme. Even before death, a pure devotee has no material affection due to his body's being spiritualized like a red-hot iron in contact with fire. Hare Krishna. So we'll stop there. Sri Narada Muni ki Jai. Vyasadeva ki Jai. Sri Krishna ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktabinda ki Jai. So tasty, huh? So tasty. Here, in the association of devotees, attentively and sincerely and seriously, even if we can't yet experience these symptoms that are being spoken about here, we are experiencing something. Each time we surrender to this process of hearing like this for an extended period of time, 45 minutes or an hour, seriously, we get something. And if we keep doing this, it accumulates, as Narada Muni said. And then when you become when your bank account, this is a real bank account, you know? It's not like the bank accounts in America where they don't give you any interest. And then as soon as they can, they'll take it away in some way or another by taxes or you know, increased prices or something. It's not like that. Every time you say Krishna, it's an eternal, it's deposited in your eternal bank account. Know it or not. And when you've said enough times Krishna, and Krishna's satisfied that you're serious, then he will reveal himself in his name. He will reveal himself in the Bhagavatam. As soon as you hear the Bhagavatam, you will see Krishna face to face. As soon as you see Radha Govinda, and that's the same deity. You've had that experience? Sometimes you come in and you look at them and they're just like, you know, it's just like, and sometimes it's not that much, so much. Because it depends on our consciousness. Krishna's there. He's there everywhere. And it just depends on our consciousness. Okay, Hare Krishna. I'll get off my soapbox now, and I will ask for reflections, points that stuck out in the reading.
The two mics on. Sometimes there's loud feedback because the mic is on loud right now. Can we move it closer to your mouth? Can I move it closer?
Why do you have to ask me? I don't know anything about it. Do the needful. Hare Krishna. First, did you have your hand up? No. Second.
Hare Krishna, it's very nice to see you.
Well, it's nice to see you, Mark.
I was just thinking the last thing you said about chanting Krishna's name and then reading Srimad-Bhagavatam and how the devotee then eventually sees Krishna face to face. And we were just reading yesterday in the 4th canto about how Dhruva Maharaj was meditating upon the Lord within the heart, and then the Lord disappeared. And then he became perturbed, and then he opened his eyes, and the Lord was standing right before him. And in the purport, Prabhupada mentions this very similar point, that throughout one's life, the devotee is worshipping and meditating upon the Lord. And finally, the devotee begins to see the Lord inside the heart. And then the devotee sees that same Lord face to face. So just that.
Thank you very much. When Krishna was tied up by Mother Yashoda, a grinding mortar, and he started to pull it, and it got stuck between the two Arjun trees. Before he pulled the Arjun tree down, what did he say? Remember? Bhagavatam? Narada Muni said to these boys that I would deliver him when they took birth as trees in the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj. So I have to do it. So sometimes Krishna, not sometimes, every time that a pure devotee of the level of Narada Muni or our dear Srila Prabhupada, who could spread Krishna consciousness all around the world, Krishna feels obliged. So he told us, and I heard it right from his mouth into my ears, and I'm passing it on to you as I heard it. If you just follow the 4 regulative principles strictly for the rest of your life and chant 16 rounds a day, every day, for the rest of your life, you will go back to Godhead. And if you do that, and it's not easy to do, Not very many devotees can do that, but if you can do that, from whatever time you start and finish, Krishna feels obliged and will make up for what you lack. So don't think that just because I'm like this or I'm like that, it's not possible. If you have faith in the words of the pure devotee, then you can get Krishna in this life, even if you're not fully purified. That is his promise. And that is Krishna's promise. What does he say in the 11th chapter? Or 11th canto? Where's our Pandit? He left to study a book. 11th canto, Krishna said, I choose to liberate the three worlds by the dust of the feet of my pure devotees. And I follow. They follow in my footsteps, and I follow in their footsteps. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains that when the devotees are following, when Krishna is following the Lord, the breeze blows the dust from their feet, from his feet, in front of the devotees. And they pick up that dust and they spread it all over the world, and the world is delivered. In the Vedic age, when this was happening, they didn't have temples. Did you know that? In Satya Yuga, there were no temples. This was like before, this was the beginning of the creation when this happened. Actually, it was in previous creation. We're not sure, actually, whether it was Satya or whatever it was. But now it's Kali Yuga, and Krishna appears especially in the deity form from the Dwapara Yuga when it started, and the holy name, and the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Srimad-Bhagavatam makes its appearance as soon as Krishna leaves this world. And where does the shelter go? To the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Try it. You'll like it. Make a vow and read it every day. No excuses, no, more busy this, busy that. Make time. We have time. The time is there. Time's eternal. It's there. We just have to find the time, and it's there. Chant the name and to read the Srimad-Bhagavatam. This is pure devotional service. No. Anyway, later on I'll read to you my offering to Prabhupada, because I mentioned this and I did some research and got some really interesting quotes from Prabhupada about this subject. Will you enlighten us?
Thanks, Maharaj. So you can enlighten us about this purport to the 5th text, where it says that actual association of devotees brings about a quick change in life for spiritual realization. And that's really encouraging. A lot of times we hear Prabhupada says it's a gradual process. So maybe you can enlighten us about that.
Yeah, well, it is a gradual process, but some people, as we've been speaking about, have accumulated so much punya that when they hear in that lifetime, at that moment, they just take it. It's not generally. It can happen that way. It can happen that way, but Narada Muni's story is to the point that he had accumulated this very special spiritual qualification of having taken the remnants from very serious, very, very advanced, liberated Bhaktivedantas, sages, rishis, even though he wasn't so qualified himself by birth. So it happened all of a sudden, but it didn't happen all of a sudden at the same time. And then that's why Krishna appeared to him. And then when he tried to do the same mechanical process, because you can't get Krishna through a mechanical process. It's not that if you read a certain number of pages or a certain number of rounds or do some external feat of I don't know what, that necessarily you're going to get Krishna face to face. He has to choose us. So yes, it can happen immediately, or if Krishna favors you even more, it can take more time. Because the more time it takes, it's the more time that you'll get a chance to hear and chant His glories. So that you can become more and more anxious, more and more eager, more and more feeling more and more separation from the Lord, to the point where if He doesn't appear right now, that's it for me, I'm finished. And even then sometimes He won't. And then sometimes He'll do that just so the person will stay here longer and preach, or do some mission that He is very dear to His heart. And at the end, He'll take him back to Godhead. We have an example of this. Srila Prabhupada told us that if you help me build this temple, I think it was 1971. Anyway, I'm not sure of the year, but it was around 70, 71, 72, around that time. Giriraj Maharaj was with Prabhupada in Calcutta. And Giriraj Maharaj is a very astute kind of observer. He was born in his father was a superior court judge in Chicago, very bright, intelligent person, and very enriched in certain ways. So he had the genes, the DNA to be very, he still does actually. He's got fantastic memory for detail, and he's observant, and he's watching everything and coming to conclusions. He's like a legal person, like a lawyer. And so he was studying Prabhupada, and he volunteered to Prabhupada. I've understood, I think, what your mission is about, to deliver the whole world. And I've come to 2 points. One is the mass distribution of your books, and the other is the construction of the temple in Mayapur that Bhaktivinoda Thakur saw from his balcony across the Jalangi. Jai Krishna Goni Thai Ki Jai. Radha Govinda Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri. Hare Krishna. So then Prabhupada looked at him when he said that. And I don't know if you've seen pictures of Prabhupada where his eyes go like this, his eyes go up, and he gets this look on his face. Giri Raj Maharaj told me, he said, the eyes got real big. He said, oh, you have understood. So we even do one little thing for these two things. Distributing these books, helping to build these temples, and glorifying the Lord, and all these things. we're conditioned by our Western nature to think that you have to do something big in order for anything to happen of any worth, of any merit. But Krishna is just the opposite. He's so grateful, he's so magnanimous, that if you just do a little thing for him sincerely, he takes it as a huge thing. And therefore sometimes he will do that. Sometimes he'll just give it. Jagai Madai. Just gave it. But Prabhupada used to say that we shouldn't try to get the honorary degree. We shouldn't think that we don't have to do something wonderful and get an honorary degree from Harvard or Yale or some big school, We should do the work. We should become humble, menial servants of the Lord. And pray for that position. Ainanda tanoji kinkaram, patitam mam vijame bhavambado, kripaya tabapada pankaja, stita duli sadrishim vichintya. My Lord, I am your eternal servant, but somehow or other, I've gotten myself into this mess, this material world, this material body, and I have to lug it around, and it smells horrible, and I have to keep, bathing it and, doing all sorts of things to keep it from being obnoxious. So please, just pick me up. Just pick me up from this Holocaust and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. And it's very significant, this verse, because an atom, on the foot is very small, very insignificant, very tiny. But Krishna doesn't see like that. Every single living being, he loves equally. Every single living being he cares for. He doesn't feel any envy. He doesn't feel any avarice. He doesn't feel any neutrality. But if we treat him in such a way, he responds accordingly. He wants to give. But it's just like if you go into a person's house, they invite you over for dinner, and as soon as you walk in the door, they run over to the corner and stand with their nose in the corner. And just stay there. You're calling out the name. Where are you? You invited me over. Where's the dinner? And then what happens? After a while, you just go away. There's another example Prabhupada used to make. When a traveling salesman comes to your door, and you're inside, and they're knocking on the door, and you're looking through the curtain, and you see a traveling salesman there selling whatever. Now, you have two choices. You can just ignore it, and he'll go away because he's got to make a living. He's got to sell whatever he's got. He's got to sell it. So he can't just spend all day knocking on the door, But out of sentiment, you open the door just a little bit. What goes? Poof, the foot goes in the door. And then the silk tongue comes out. And pretty soon you've got a, vacuum cleaner or whatever he's selling, Maya's like that. You give him an inch, and you'll take a mile. So these things, these miraculous statements are true, but it doesn't always say when or how exactly it happens. That's up to the mercy of the Lord. He can do whatever he likes. And the consciousness that brings us to the point of being able to receive that kind of mercy from him is that total conviction of his inconceivability. And there's ample evidence in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, ample evidence. The things that Krishna does while he's on this planet are inconceivable. But inconceivable doesn't mean that we can't understand something. It means you can't understand everything, and nobody can understand everything about Krishna. That's what inconceivable means. But everyone has the capacity to understand enough to be able to welcome him into our hearts and go back to Godhead. Everyone. Okay, I'm going to stop now because I've been traveling all day and I'm also, I have to preserve my voice. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Thank you for your ears and for your hearts and for your willingness to sit all the way through. Hare Krishna. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Narada Muni ki jai. Shri Vyasadeva ki jai. Samarita Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Okay, everyone out in cyberspace. See you tomorrow. Please share with your loved ones and Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming. Hare Bol.
His Holiness Kesava Bharati Dasa Goswami Maharaj ki jai.